So what happens when the thread comes all the way out of the system? You are using a cone of thread, you've used it all the way up, the last end spun off the cone and went down all the way through the system, and there is no longer any thread, at least for a single needle, inside this system. How do you get your thread back through the system and to where you can use it again? So I'm going to remove this, pull this bright orange thread all the way out of the system, and now I need to figure out, so you might have an empty cone here, you might have nothing because you started to change colors and you forgot about it and then you started sewing and all the way through. I need to figure out how to get thread back on here, back through the system and back down so that I can get it sewing again. And what's the first thing I'm going to do? So to start, I'm going to not panic and I'm going to go to my operator's kit. So my operator's kit will contain a monofilament. It's a long, thick string of plastic, and it's notched, typically at each end. Double check that, because you'll want to make sure when you're doing this that you can actually attach the thread to it, and that's what that notch is for. So I'm going to start by unraveling this, and then I'm going to feed this up through the system. You saw me put the pinch roller back down. I just did that to give myself a little bit more room up here and a little bit, make it easier for me to see. As I do this, I'm going to hold on to both ends. Well, I'm going to feed one end. I'm going to hold on to the other because if I don't, as I'm feeding this in, this might be whipping around and unthreading needles that I don't want it to unthread. So I tend to hold on to both ends. And then I will begin to feed. And you can do this from the top down, or you can do this from the bottom up. I tend to go from the bottom up, others go the other way, doesn't really matter. I'm going to start to feed this into place. I've got that little notched end, it's gonna go in all the way up. I'm watching right up here for when the other end of that comes out. All right, so I have this end sticking out. I'm going to then place my cone. It doesn't really matter. You could have the cone up there first or second. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to place my cone over that. And then I'm going to clip my thread into this notch, just like that. So now that notch is holding that thread, and I can then pull this thread with the monofilament all the way back down through the system. And there's the other end of my thread. So now I can thread this up just like my other 15 needles. Monofilament is one way to get the thread back through the system, but there is another way. So if you can't find that, or if you don't want to fiddle with it, you do have another option of getting the thread through the system. And for this one, we'll need a very sharp end on your thread, so just leave your thread loose and trim it up. If you hold your thread tight and trim it, it will tend to fray a little bit. This time, I do need to put the cone on first. With monofilament, you can do it either way, but this one, I need to have it on first. And then feed the thread into the tube so that it just stays on its own. Now, I'm going to take canned air, aim right at the top of the tube, and spray. And it should push the thread all the way through the system. Yep, and it comes out the front. I will typically pull a little bit of extra thread and then line it up on the V-notch and push the pinch roller down so that I have something to pull against as I'm threading. I'm going to go down through the upper thread guide. I'm going to go down through the first of the 3 holes in the middle thread guide. That's the one that makes the bend. And you're going to go down and under this bar. Now this bar is your thread sensor, so it needs to loop under that, otherwise the machine can't tell that it has thread in it. And I'm going to come back up through the hole in the front of the middle thread guide. Now we need to thread through the take-up lever. We go from the right to the left. Now I need to go down through the last hole in the middle thread guide, which is the one in the back. I'm going to go through the last hole in the thread guides, and it's the lower thread guide. Pull that through, and as I do, I'll go ahead and push that into that felt. If you need a little more thread, lift the pinch roller and pull a little thread through. Now thread the needle. So now that that needle is threaded, I'm going to close the grabber and catch this thread back in the trap. I'm going to do that with the adjustment and the center key. Windshield wiper and bullseye is what a lot of people still call it. I'm going to then trim this up just like everybody else, and then I will kick that grabber back out. I'm going to open it up, adjustment and center key, opens it back up, and now I'm threaded and I have the system all threaded up and ready to go, and I'm ready to start sewing again.